Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackman. Saturday Down South. We're going to have Eric Fawcett join us in a little bit. I don't even reference on the show anymore all the places that Fawcett's work is at. It's gotten too tedious for even me to keep up, and I've co-hosted with him for 7 years. But got a special guest this week, Ryan Hammer, who created the Trapezoid of Excellence, which I think is one of my favorite things in college basketball, quite honestly. As also the host of the Blue Blooded podcast, which is a great listen. We're going to play in honor of them a little buy, sell, hold with him on the SEC today, but wanted to get Ryan in. He's got his Florida shirt on, which is nice for joining the program. And yeah, if you're not following Ryan on various social media circles, what are we even doing here? But at Ryan Hammer 09, on the X machine and various other places, his TikTok feed is even more active. Ryan, thanks for the time, man.
I appreciate you for having me. I had to dress the part, obviously. So Florida basketball. So, but yeah, I appreciate the extensive intro that always humbles me, but I appreciate it a ton.
So, last year, obviously kind of I don't want to say it wasn't stunning to anybody in the league office. And I think to the people that follow the league closely, we would be like Fawcett and I would be lying if we said we thought the SEC was going to be the best league in the country. But we also looked at the league and we were like, man, a lot of these teams are kind of old and have a chance to be really good. And, I think for the first time since really in my memory, they were the best league in the country. I don't know if they're going to be, I think you could make the argument the Big 12 will be a little better this year. But the SEC's sort of rise in the sport isn't going anywhere. And even with a lot of attrition, particularly at Florida, Tennessee, Auburn lost almost their whole team, but still a ton of talent.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think, like you said, I don't think anybody expected it at all. I didn't expect the SEC to be that good. And maybe you look at it in the beginning of last year, you say, oh, it could be, right? But you don't say it's going to be one of the best conferences ever. Texas and OU coming in weren't transcendent programs or teams by any means. So it's not like the conference wouldn't have been as great without them. It still would have been definitely the best conference in the country last year. And I think it's a lot of it is financial resources. It's pretty simple. I had an NIL and portal and things is how it goes with everybody knows SEC football kind of runs college sports in terms of financial capacity. So there's a trickle down effect, and there's a lot of attention and different aspects and resources that kind of get dispersed throughout all of athletics, and basketball. SEC basketball has been one of the biggest benefactors of that. And you see with the portal, transfer portal opens, Florida, Auburn, Alabama, even Missouri, everybody. It's the SEC teams that are always making the biggest splashes. So,
and look, even if you don't believe the numbers that have come out, like Kentucky maybe spending $20 million on a roster, you spend if you're somebody like Ryan, you probably spend way too much time not even interacting, but getting mentions from people who will argue until they're blue in the face about that number. But yeah, the more that Alabama wins, the more that Auburn wins, Florida now kind of rises back to prominence. Kentucky's just going to keep spending more money until that happens too. So you get into the football type arms race, I think.
Yeah. And also it's a good point about Florida. Made me think about it. And I completely forgot Kentucky. There's always so many teams. I'm always forgetting someone at the top. And even Tennessee, whatever, but Florida is a really good example of Todd Golden's a great coach. They're doing things the right way. It's not just money, whatever, but the financial resource increase and incline because of football and basically athletics as a whole has given a coach like Todd Golden in a school like Florida the opportunity to be great. And now that they've really established themselves, it's not just about money. Now it's about, hey, we are the best. We're going to get you to the NBA. We are going to win national championships. So I think Nate Oates in Alabama has been a really big benefactor of that also, where the program was kind of not in the gutter, but not in a great spot before he got there. And he's done wonders. Everybody knows that. And without the financial resource, he wouldn't have been able to elevate it to what it is now. But because he was given that platform, now it's based off of culture and winning and coaching more than it is just money also.
Yeah, such a great point about Oates, too. And you think back to when he was hired and the fact that UCLA was the other program banging on the door. And Nate kind of had the foresight to say, UCLA likes to underpay coaches. You ask in the industry, they're famous for it. They're like, it's a privilege to coach at UCLA, so we don't have to pay you as well. And Alabama's like, yeah, we'll pay you a lot of money. Come down here and now he's the best coach on that campus. Like I know Kalen DeBoer, their football fans are kind of waiting and seeing what's going to happen, but it's astounding. They've been to the Sweet 16, I think, at least the Sweet 16 in the last 3 seasons, right? The Elite Eight and the Final Four in the last 2, in opposite order. But yeah, I mean, it's like they lose Mark Sears, and still, I think the expectation is they'll play deep into March.
Right. The team's obviously still going to be good, and I think they're like going into the season is probably the worst you'll see Alabama in the preseason indefinitely going forward until something crazy happens. And right, you lose one of the nation's best players. Like, yeah, it's going to happen. It ain't going to be easy. Even if you bring in a transfers, whatever, you could have brought in anybody. It's not going to be the same continuity wise and stuff. So it's interesting, but this is like the floor for them. The floor for Nate Oates in Alabama is back end of the top 25, which isn't that he probably wouldn't love that. He doesn't like that. He wants to be better than that. But at the same time, having that as a floor, that's what Kansas has as a floor, and Duke and et cetera. Like that's what you want. That's where you want to be. So
last one before we get into some buy sell is the coaches too. Like you mentioned, obviously you have maybe the either 1 or 2 at coaches. I guess he's 40 now, but 40 or under in Todd Golden, wherever you want to put him and John Shire. I'm not going to argue with anybody. Your best 2 coaches under 40 in the sport. You have Oates, Bruce Pearl, Rick Barnes is a Hall of Famer. John Calipari, you could make an argument that he's barely in the top half of the coaches in the SEC right now. That's how good the league is from a coaching standpoint. That reminds me of the old Big East, honestly, like the Big East that they made 30 for 30s about. It's crazy.
It is wild. And the quality of coaches, I think, goes a long way. And the SEC is an attractive place for coaches to want to be. It's easier to bring guys in. They obviously are willing to shell out more money and pay more and things. But now the conference is so good and it ain't going to go anywhere. And Texas is probably going to be on the rise. And other programs are trying to keep up, where you had 14 teams that could have gotten to the tournament last year. So it's an attractive place to be, even though it's so competitive for that. Because of its competitiveness, I think is why it's so attractive also.
So if you guys, again, make sure you listen to Blue Blooded Podcast. I really enjoy it. We're going to do some buy, sell, hold with Ryan on some SEC topics. I had a graphic of my SEC preseason power rankings. Fawcett and I rotate our ballot at SEC Media Days, and this is my year to do it. Anyway, the graphic, something happened to I'm just going to say the dog ate the graphic. So but my top 6, and this is in order, is Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn. And 4 to 6 was really hard. I feel like 1 to 3 for me was pretty easy, except for like Fawcett and I have gone back and forth on Kentucky and Arkansas. And really, like, again, gets back to what we were just it's coaching. Like Mark Pope, I think, is one of the best offensive minds in the sport. I like their roster a lot. And so that kind of gets us to the first question, which is buy, sell, or hold Kentucky as a top 3 team in the SEC if Jaden Quaitance isn't 100%.
Yeah, that's a really interesting wrinkle too, because like even if you take the JQ part out of it, right, and just like assume you get him, whatever, like it's not easy to be a top 3 in the SEC, because I say it about the Big Ten. I've always said it about the Big Ten because it's like it's a dog fight all over the place. And now the SEC has become that. And that's a good thing because it's just so good at the top. And for different, I'm not saying the Big Ten is SEC caliber because I don't think it is, but it's hard because you can be the 4th best team in the SEC, but you can go win a national championship. Like that's how good the league is here. So it's like, it's not a slight to be like, oh yeah, I'm not sure they're going to be a top 3 team. I would probably, that's tough. I'd probably buy that they're going to be a top 3 team in the SEC because of 2 things. One, their depth. They're going to have probably the best depth in the country. So I think that goes a long way, and they're fixing the holes a little bit that they had last year defensively all over the place. And I think Jaden Quains is a huge part of that. So that's why I had slight hesitance to buy, I'd say, on that. Where I think the interior presence, having him one of their highest upside, if not their highest upside player at full strength, is going to be a big swing, big X factor for them, especially in conference. But because of their depth and being able to compete with any single team in any single style in the SEC, I have confidence that definitely in the regular season that they will be a top 5 team for sure, and they should be a top 3, if not maybe even win the SEC, win the conference. So.
Yeah, no, I think they're if he's healthy by February, I think they can win the league. And like if you told me they won the league, it wouldn't surprise me. I think the biggest question for them, and I know they got Mo Diabate, and I love him. He's a dog. He competes. He does stuff. They didn't have that kind of player last year. The guy that I thought, like when they had games where in the last 10 minutes, other teams made winning plays and they couldn't get the stop. They couldn't get the key rebound. I think he gives them that. I think Denzel Aberdeen gives them that, to be quite honest. I know my listeners are going to throw stuff at their radio when they hear that. I think they brought him in as a culture piece because I don't think Zell's going to play 30 minutes for them. I think he's going to play 20 to 22 come March, just like he did at Florida. And I think he's great in that role. But like, to me, it's, do they, because I've heard like Jeff Goodman and some people worry about their shooting a little bit. And like, I'm not. Like, Mark Pope will figure out ways to get Otega Owe and all those guys buckets. Like,
that's the last thing I'd be worried about is Kentucky finding ways to score and shoot.
It's rebounding and guarding, right?
Yeah, 100%. The good, and I think Florida fans, at least, like, they're not going to say Denzel's not good and he's not a good piece for them. He actually probably is more needed on Kentucky than he is in Florida in the role that he is. Actually, well, maybe not now. Maybe they could use him back. They need some defense in the backcourt for Florida. That's another thing. But I fully agree with you. They need guys like that. And I don't think Mark Pope schematically is going to change much on the defensive end, which I don't think is ideal. But the difference of them being a national title contender, SEC title contender, and not is not being this unbelievable defense. It's we have to be as good as we are offensively, and we need playmakers on the defensive end. We need, like you said, guys like Mo and JQ when he's healthy, and Denzel if they're in that closing rotation to go and make plays at the end, and you can rely on kind of talent that way if you're so good on the offensive end, which Mark Pope teams always are, and Kentucky will be this year.
Love it. I loved your segment on Arkansas. We'll go there next. I thought this was the hardest one that I sent you. But buy, sell, hold. This is John Calipari's best chance at a national championship at Arkansas. I will say, full disclosure up front, that my biggest X factor for them is Cal.
Yeah.
That I love Malik Ewan. But I don't know if I love Malik Ewan playing for Cal, for example. Like, and you could just go down, but this roster, I think it's the best roster in the SEC.
Yeah, I don't fully agree with that it's the best roster. Although you look at four or five of the rosters and you're like, well, those are all elite, and that's kind of about it. I'd say because of the front court that there are a couple other teams that are better, but in a vacuum, like, yeah, they're right up there. I'll sell because I think, that's tough though. Maybe I'll hold on it because it could be his best chance. I'll probably hold. But I would bet that he's going to have another one or two ridiculously elite recruiting classes. And I think it comes down to the one best player also. Like, he won with a Kentucky squad with like AD in 2012 that was just like loaded. But I think having a Darius Acuff, which is like his D Rose from back in like 08, whatever that was, is a potential to bring them to a Final Four and maybe even a national title if things go well. But he will get another elite recruiting class, if not 2 or 3 of them. And then I think the returners will be better on another team in the future. But you have to put those 2 pieces together. So that's why I wouldn't buy fully that like this is it. This is make or break. This is the 1 year. There will be other opportunities of this level. I think it's just, are they going to have a better opportunity? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I love that. I love the Darius Acuff shout. And I mean, again, I think I'm with you. You could probably pick 4 rosters and say it's the best roster and like at least make a reasonable argument. But in any event, I thought this one. So this is one that Fawcett and I have debated. And again, if you take away the fact that Nate Oates coaches them, and we love Nate Oates, and he's one of the best 5 coaches in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah.
My answer would actually be different if Nate Oates weren't coaching the team. But buy, sell, hold, Alabama is second weekend good with this roster. And I'll tell you, I would hold just because I don't know how much I like that front court. I do think they were financially limited a little bit from an NIL standpoint. Obviously, I would have sold this before Phylon came back. I'm sure they're going to score. He might play 5 guards some, which is going to be awesome. But I didn't like. I thought Bull Bowen was a weird take. I thought I saw him play a bunch last year because I covered the ACC for Saturday Down South too, and against good front court players, Alex Condon, people like that, he was really outclassed.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what they get. Like for me, Aiden Sherrill, if he's healthy, great. Maybe the Patriot League kid can handle the step up. He's got to give him like 20, 25 minutes though. I think
it's a tough one. I think you're right. If it was just buy or sell, I'd lean sell, but the hold option I'd hold because like you said, with Oates and their quality, their team is definitely good enough to go to the second weekend, but it's nowhere near as like Mark Sears teams in the last few years. They're a top 5-10 team in the country. They're a 2 seed or 1 seed. Like they've been unbelievable. I don't think their ceiling is that good this year. I don't think their ceiling is being a top 5 team like they have been and competing with anybody in the country. They will get, like you kind of said, outclassed at times this year. I kind of feel like Kentucky and Alabama have kind of like flip-flop from last year to this year in terms of like quality and where they're going to be at.
Oh, great shout.
Yeah. Like I was at the Kentucky-Alabama game in Tuscaloosa last year. And I remember, I think someone was injured out also, but it didn't really matter. I remember being there and be like, yeah, like Alabama, they're very similar teams, but Alabama is like a clear gap better than this team. And I think it might be the opposite this year, similar styles, but better front court in Kentucky and more experience. That's not saying that Alabama can't go to the second weekend, obviously, because like you see a 6 or 7 seed or a 3 or 4 or 5 seed always go to the second weekend. So they can definitely get there, and that's the range they'll be in. But it's just going to be a very big toss up, and they're going to it's going to be matchup dependent. So I'd hold, but faith in Nate Oates that he kind of knows how to have a really good floor of success. So that's why I have some faith in that.
I love it. 2 more quick questions for Ryan Hammer, Blue Blooded Podcast, all sorts of social media platforms. Make sure that you follow his stuff and the Trapezoid of Excellence, which when the season starts, watch that because it's a pretty good insightful look at who actually can make the late rounds of the NCAA tournament. There's a pretty good correspondence and success rate for Ryan there. Who do you think, is there a transfer to you that like we're not really talking about that you think, in the SEC that maybe we should be talking about more?
Yeah, I thought about this for a while, and like there's so many transfers coming in. There are guys like at South Carolina, Mike Sherrod I like, but I don't think he's gotten some love, but he's interesting. Javon Porter is a big one for me. Going back to Columbia, Missouri, and going to Mizzou, where obviously MPJ went originally, and the Porter family is very heavily involved. But Javon Porter, like his years at Pepperdine and Loyola, I thought after the Pepperdine year with like Houston Millet and like those teams, I thought he was going to go to a major school. I thought he was going to go to Missouri maybe or something or whatever it was. And I think he had some legal stuff at one time, but I know he's fully good and he's ready. He's there. He's ready to roll. He's a really good player and he's got a lot of higher upside than people think. He had some NBA draft love after year one. He was getting a lot of hype there and a lot of expectation. Maybe he'll transfer up and then prove it and then go to the league. Really mobile, dynamic two-way forward and like big that I have some faith in. I think Dennis Gates will let him run a lot of too and get out on the open floor. And I think he's one to watch for sure. And I think the other one is Deion Thomas at LSU. LSU is a weird team. McMahon, like they need to turn a corner at some point. Otherwise, it's probably going to go south pretty fast for the staff and the regime that they got going right there. And Deion didn't have as good of a year as I thought he would have last year at UNLV, but he was still very good. And I still think that he could be one of the nation's best like facilitators. And now like in year 3, he's smaller, but he's quick, he's crafty, he could score, he can create. He could be one of the best guards in the SEC this year that no one's talking about.
Those are some great shouts and kind of directions I didn't really totally expect, which I like. I'll add 2. I think Dalen Swain at Texas, and just the fact that like Simeon Wilcher is going to be healthy for a full year. I thought I don't think they deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. We were very candid about that on our show, but they got in. And okay, great. But I thought they were a much better team when Wilcher came back and played. We saw that in the SEC tournament. I love the idea of him next to Swain. I think Sean Miller will get the most out of Tremont Mark, who's a guy that has always had all the talent in the world, and it's always been about consistency. So he's one that kind of stands out to me a little bit. And then, maybe some people are talking about Keyshawn Hall a lot, and maybe they're not. Like he averaged 18 points a game in the Big 12. And I think his personality is I think it fits so nicely with Bruce Pearl.
He'll be good. He'll be really good. I think he led the Big 12 in scoring last year, technically. Yeah. He's good. He's ready. They're all in on him. He's like him and Tahad together and a couple, they're the duo who's going to score tons of buckets.
Yeah. It's with them. It's like who else scores, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially if Kevin Overton doesn't hit shots, but that's so we'll close with Florida. So I've gone back and forth on all this because we mentioned Zell. As we move, and I've got Graham Hall from 247 Sports getting ready to join me after you, and I know Graham is going to chime in on as we get closer to the season, the more I think Florida will miss Denzel Aberdeen. I think Boogie Flan is a really good defender. We talked to Walt, and he said one of the hardest defenders he had to play against was Flan. I obviously do not think Xaivian Lee is a good defender. That's not why they brought him in. But to me, it's like the question with Florida is they have the best front court in the country. I will defend that argument. So it then becomes like in close games, they went to Walt, right? Can they go to Fland? Can they go to Lee? Can you do that by committee? And that's kind of defines their ceiling. What do you think? Because people are tired of hearing me talk about Florida.
No, yeah, honestly, like you mentioned X Factor to me before the show, and for Florida, and like you basically kind of hit most of it. We were talking about Zell earlier, and I think defensive presence on the perimeter is going to be huge for them. Now they played more 3-guard lineups than anything else last year, so it's different. You also had Will, Elijah. Walt wasn't seen as a good defender, but in the national championship and Final Four, Walt made defensive plays to ice games at times. So you got to give him credit, and he plays hard as hell. So I think that's where like Xaivian can learn from. And Xavian's my guy. Like I'm drinking out of a Princeton mug this morning. I know him very, very well. He's a great kid. And I know mentally he's there and he's locked in, but he knows he's not the greatest defender, but he can learn from a guy like Walt and those things. Perimeter defense is definitely one. But again, they're not playing a lot of 3-guard lineups. So Haugh at the 3 on closing lineups is going to give you that extra ability there where Boogie can kind of help pick up a little bit. And then all of a sudden you only have one maybe not great or somewhat negative defender on the floor at that point. That's definitely part of it. And then the closing thing was literally exactly because Todd likes to play with the guys where he lets the guards play free. That's why he brought in Xaivian. That's why, and even Boogie offensively,
Right.
like these are guys that everything will stay static a little bit and be stable. And then you need dynamic guards like Walt and Elijah and Will to go get you buckets and go kind of make decisions on their own with the ball in their hands. And that's the kind of guard that Xaivian is. So he's going to thrive offensively in that sense. But who's going to be the closer, or is anybody going to be the closer? Is Thomas Haugh going to have a crazy offensive breakout that all of a sudden he's like, oh, he's actually the closer? And I think that you can balance if they're good enough. And I think they will be. Where like Boogie he was an unbelievably high recruit. He was a great player when he's healthy. Hopefully he's completely good and 100% good to go now the entire year. And I think you get a lot more out of him offensively than people give him credit for. I think Xavian's going to translate fine. So you can, because you don't need a closer like Walt. Like you did this year because it's just kind of how it meant to be. But no one in college basketball history and going forward indefinitely can expect to have a closer like Walter Clayton. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that since like Kemba and guys like that. So
yeah, it was crazy.
It's hard you want to replace that, but it's ridiculous to expect that. So I think having some kind of closing plan and options is fine in balance if they're all at a high level, which they definitely have the capability to do so. So to say Florida can't go back to back, I think that's what my shirt says, actually, back to back on the bottom. To say they can't go back to back would be crazy.
Well, and you know, we saw UConn have to replace an elite guard and go, you know, they found a way to go back to back. They were smart about the portal. They trusted. There were people who didn't love Cam Spencer, and those people were wrong.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I don't know about him in that league. Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying Florida's UConn, but like UConn, they do return an elite front court. So the cool thing is we're gonna know so fast with Florida, like their schedule.
It's crazy.
Like they're playing. Forget Arizona opening night. Like anything can happen. They're gonna go out to Vegas, play pretty much a road game there. But like they have Arizona, they have Duke and Cameron, they have UConn. They're gonna have a pretty good idea of what they have once they enter SEC play.
Yeah, and I think like having the entire front court back. It really is crazy, like bringing everybody back, all four of those really key pieces. And I think that gives you so much stability to where the floor is going to be high early on in the season. I know the guards have the ball in their hands a lot, but the floor is so high from the jump. But the expectation will be high. So any little hiccup earlier on, people might overreact on.
No, Ryan, you haven't been around Florida fans. They won't overreact at all.
Let me tell you something. I'm from New Jersey, born and raised, still live here. Learning about SEC sports fandom through them coming at me has been something over the last few years. Now I'm accustomed to it. And being from New Jersey, we got edge up here, and I love to bicker and whatever. I had no idea. Like no matter what, I could be Auburn super fan this year. I say one bad thing the next year, all of a sudden I hate Auburn, and the Tennessee fans hate me. Kentucky, it's funny. I think it's hilarious. You
got to get you got to go to Two Rings Baldy School with Danny, and
seriously,
that's the standard. The Northeast, just get away from me. Standard is
exactly. So I give it back now though. I'm used to it, and I
love it.
It's all good.
All right, Ryan, tell everybody where they can find you, and we appreciate you hopping on today.
Yeah, no, first time, but I appreciate it. It's been good. It's good to connect with y'all for sure. Even though we didn't catch Fawcett here, I know he's a busy man, but you said it before, Ryan Hammer everywhere on social media. Blue Blooded podcast has kind of been up and running for a few weeks now, and hopefully it only takes to new strides and stuff. So go follow those social accounts also, and tap in on Spotify and YouTube. But no, man, I appreciate you for having me for sure.
Yeah, we will. We'll make sure Fawcett actually shows up next time. We know how busy he is, but thanks,
I'll
Ryan.
hold him to it. Yep. See ya.
Appreciate you, man.
Yep.
All right, I got Graham Hall, 247 Sports. Fresh off is DJ Lagway going to play against Long Island University beat? And I know probably relieved to not have to talk about DJ Lagway's soft tissue or, the fact that Trey Wilson has played 5 games in 2 years and everybody thinks he's great. Okay, I'm done. I'm done throwing shade on that building. Graham, man, what's up? It's been a minute, at least since you hopped on our pod. You got to hear some of that discussion, I'm sure. It's interesting to hear like what a national writer kind of thinks of Florida. Obviously seems pretty high on the Gators. In full disclosure, I think Ryan had Florida playing for the national title again and losing this time to Houston.
I mean, going back to back is incredibly, difficult. There's a reason that 3 teams in our lifetimes have done it, right? I mean,
Yep.
It kind of makes me cringe a little bit sometimes when I see everyone already talking about Florida going back to back, because you're setting yourself up for enormous expectations, almost kind of setting yourself up for failure in a sense, because, and you were talking about Florida fans here, and no shade to Florida fans whatsoever. But if you're going into the year thinking championship or bust, I mean, 363 teams are going to be disappointed, right? If they have those expectations, it would be fantastic for everything to go well for Florida and them to be in contention, to be there to make a deep run. But let's remember, and not to take anything away whatsoever from the national championship this year, they kind of needed 3, I don't want to say miracles, but improbable comebacks down the stretch there. And it's way too early to tell if they're going to have the ice in the veins type shooters who are going to be able to make plays like that. Obviously, you have Thomas Haugh back, but we still got to see Boogie Flan and Xaivian Lee. As high as I am on those guys, we're talking about replacing Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard. Those are massive shoes to fill. And if Florida can even in this era retool and be back in the conversation, compete for the SEC championship, make a deep run, even getting through the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, we've seen a lot of really, really good teams only make it that far that had championship aspirations. There can only be one. So we'll see how it all plays out. But like you said, man, I'm grateful to be able to talk a little bit of basketball right now when we're so football centric focused right now. And a lot of the conversation is on speculating and projections and what we can glean from, 12 minutes of practice footage 5 times in fall camp.
Well, I think one cool thing about having you on is that, you're around the basketball program too. And it's always good to have someone to talk to our listeners about that, and they can hear a voice that's not mine or Eric's and kind of hear the perspective on that. And I get a lot of these messages about minutes and like, this guy's going to play here and this guy's going to play here. And like one thought I have on that, and I wrote this down, I was like, I got to ask Graham about this. Like, outside of Urban Klabsar, who I think is going to play quite a bit, I don't think there's a ton of new minutes to be had on this team. Like, I'll give you an example. Like A.J. Brown. I know that he's coming off surgery and they hope to have him healthy. I don't think he's going to play a lot. Like, you hear these national writers talking about like, oh, he'll slide into that Will Richard role. And I'm kind of like, no, he won't. Like, I think if he plays 10 minutes a game, that might mean something went wrong this season. And, I'm kind of interested in your thought on that, because CJ Ingram and Alex Lloyd are other guys you could talk about. But really, like, I think Florida's front court those minutes are set, right? So it becomes a matter, because Ryan and I didn't even talk about Micah Handlockton, and he's back. And, so it just becomes like a matter of what minutes that Flan and Lee don't play, and then whatever minutes are left over, depending on how much Tommy Haugh plays at the 3.
I'm with you entirely that Florida's front court should be considered the best in the country. I mean, they were one of the top front courts, if not the top front court in the nation last year. And then you return everybody and you get Micah Handlockton for a full off season where he's not just spending it recovering. He's at a really, really good weight right now. He's added muscle to his frame. Ruben Chinyelu, you got to think that there's going to be a jump there offensively for him. Tommy continues to be Tommy. I mean, that's a guy who is going to continue to make highlight reel plays that surprise you at times. And if he gets even better at putting the ball on the floor, finishing, from within 14, 12 feet, uses his size and gives them some, different looks there offensively as well, this is going to be the best front court in the nation. But you talk about the minutes in the backcourt. That is a really fascinating piece of the puzzle to me, because I have a hard time seeing a situation where one of either Xaivian Lee or Boogie Flan is not on the court at some time. And their skill sets allow you to play either one of them off the ball or on the ball. And then who's going to get those other minutes? Is it Urban Klabzar? Isaiah Brown is a fascinating one to me. I think a lot of people are just not talking a lot about Isaiah Brown. Go back to AJ, and no disrespect to AJ whatsoever, but I think we are going to look back at it and see Isaiah Brown play a little bit of a larger role this upcoming season just because of his skill set. And yeah, I think that he's going to be a guy who you're going to see a little bit more of this season playing at the 2. Maybe you play some 3-guard lineups where his size gives you the ability to play at the 3 as well. He obviously needs to continue maturing and improve from a confidence standpoint as well. This is his first year really where you're expecting anything out of him. Last year, just getting him on the floor was kind of win in and of itself. Getting a freshman to come in and contribute in a backcourt that was as loaded as Florida's is, the fact he could even see the floor in some spurts was a win, in my opinion, just given the depth that Florida had. But I think it's going to be a big year for him. AJ Brown is an interesting one because I do think if you get here to SEC play, even if he hasn't played a ton by throughout the non-conference play, which, like you said, we're going to know a lot more about this Florida team during non-conference play than we did a season ago. It was really kind of by that North Carolina game last year where we finally started to realize, okay, this team could be really, really good if all goes according to plan, if they avoid injuries, if they keep playing as well as they are. But we're going to know a lot more about this team. So even if they take a couple lumps there and AJ Brown is still working his way back, Florida was really fortunate last season from a health standpoint. I think that that's not a given whatsoever. So Brown's maturity, his talent, his experience could be a lot more vital come SEC play, just given the penchant for undesirable injuries. So I think in that regard, he's going to be valuable for Florida. But what is his role going to be initially coming back from shoulder surgery? I don't know. I wouldn't really sit here and tell everyone that expect him to play 15 minutes a game when they take the floor in Las Vegas against Arizona. I don't think that's realistic right now. But I do think he's going to be someone that they're going to rely on significantly this season, especially his ability to just, impact the boards positively. He can drill threes from the corner. I think he shot 52% from the left corner last year on catch and shoot attempts.
Great
that is just, that's one of the best, marks in the nation there. And so you have two guards who are fantastic at penetrating and then making the open pass in a split second. And a guy like him who can stand in the corner and knock down shots. And then you have all this height and size that can crash the boards, get you second chance opportunities, limit another team's ability to run out and transition. I think that's going to be valuable by SEC play, but I just don't know what we're going to see during the first 2 months of the season in that regard.
Yeah, I do think from a shooting standpoint, they'll find ways to get AJ on the floor. I know the other thing is, I know he's not officially the offensive coordinator, but, they did bring in Dave Klatsky, who I think is going to be he certainly will be part of the offensive hive mind there with stepping into the role that Hovde left. He was known as a really great offensive mind and modern offensive mind, both when he was the assistant at Colgate, where he was the OC for a great coach, Matt Langle, and then at NYU, even though that's at the Division III level, they were doing a lot of modern sort of NBA sets. They'll find ways to get AJ open. I think you made a really good point, and I'm sure it comes from conversations, but I've had like 2 people on staff, because sometimes if it's one, I'm not saying I don't believe these guys when they tell me stuff. I'm not, and I know some of them listen, so I don't want them to take this in any way the wrong way. But like when 2 people say, yeah, Alex Condon is probably going to be the one who's first team all SEC. He's the one who's going to be on All-American list. Tommy Haugh has just been kind of a force this summer. And I've heard that from multiple people. Like, I do think whether it's the 3 or the 4, if you wanted one guy on the Gators that maybe people aren't talking about a lot, we even saw a graphic from, I think it was Field of 68. It was somebody where they were like, name the best trio among these teams. And they left Tommy Haugh off of it. I don't know about that move, man. That kid he's something else.
Yeah, they should make a graphic that's named the best, quartet in college basketball. Who's going to be up there with Florida when you talk about Xaivian, Boogie Flan, Alex Condon, Thomas Haugh? I mean, that's 4 right there that would start on every SEC team. I don't think there's an SEC team out there that wouldn't start one of those guys. Maybe there's still some people who are sleeping a good bit on Xaivian Lee, but I think that he's going to wake people up this season. You are going to have a backcourt that I think is going to be better at creating turnovers in a sense. As good as Elijah Martin was, I think that's just kind of wild to say, but just the length that you have and the potential for contesting shots even at the rim from your backcourt, I think is going to help Florida be one of the top rim protection teams in the country. And then Boogie Flan, I still think is just underrated when it comes to, his defensive prowess. I know that people discredit the non-conference play and, he's a freshman and you look at some of the numbers, but his ability just to get in passing lanes and just instincts to be able to create loose balls and turn it into turnovers and get out in transition, I think is going to be really, really good for Florida this season. But yeah, I do kind of feel like there are still a lot of people out there who are sleeping on Thomas Haugh. With that said, we've seen some early predictions that have him as a potential first-round guy. I think there was one even that had him as a lottery pick. Let's see, obviously, but his rate of progress so far has been really impressive. And I also think that there's a lot of people in the national media that don't realize that this is an old guy. He reclassified, he took that extra year at Perkiomen before coming over, and that really helped him make an impact as a freshman. He's 21 years old now as a junior. This is someone who I think his position versatility, his ability to just contribute positively in every way on the court is maybe it's really underappreciated still. I know that Florida fans shouldn't underappreciate it. They don't win the championship without Thomas Haugh. I mean, you can say that about multiple guys on the team, obviously, because it's a team sport, but that's a guy that was a critical piece to Florida. I mean, they don't come back against Texas Tech without Tommy. And his confidence as a shooter, his improved shooting form, footwork, knowledge of where to be, that's going to take a big leap this season as well. And we already saw it being so impressive last year. And then you talk about the ability to play either the 3 or the 4. Alex Condon did have a few rough stretches last year, but we also saw some dominant games from him. He comes back from that right ankle injury in the end of February, and then he puts together, I think, a 17-15 line. He had another really, really good game where I think he was around 20 and 10. Yeah. I mean, when he is on and when he is, playing well, playing with confidence, and they're running the offense through him, which I think Florida is still going to do a ton this season, is run through the bigs. That's a guy who was just one of the best in the country. And then you pair them up together, how that's going to work out is going to be really, really interesting. But yeah, no offense to Field of 68 whatsoever. They do a fantastic job, provide great content out there, but maybe they are still sleeping a little bit on Tommy.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned Condon, who is a guy that I think will take a jump, especially as a shooter this year, because that's all he heard was you need to be able to hit shots. I guess 2 things offensively with him. And I would also add to Graham's point, like he had the injury. He was obviously dominant at Alabama. He finally felt good going to the Sweet 16. And those of us that were in San Francisco, like he was dominating that game. He ended up with 13 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. And most of that came before he rolled his ankle. So as good as their bigs were, Derek Queen and the other kid, Reese, Julian Reese. I mean, Condon was the best big on the floor until he hurt himself. So just kind of would add that. But the 2 things offensively with him are, one, I expect him to shoot a little better. And then even if he doesn't shoot more, I think he shoots better. But the other thing is, like, Florida didn't play in the short roll a ton last year. Like, Todd would tell you that point blank. And you don't have to when you can run gut dribble handoff to Walt Clayton, or, you can get Walter Clayton in isolation or Will Richard on the baseline. There's a lot of things Florida did offensively last year that was awesome, but a lot of it was because you had Walter Clayton or you had Will Richard who could shoot off a screen. And this season, with a player like Xaivian, who's incredible in the pick and roll, I really think, and Alex Condon and his quickness, I think there's a chance that he gets a lot of opportunities in the short roll this season. So his offense could explode in that regard. And it's not necessarily because he's a ton better, although I expect him to be, but it's because Florida runs things for him that they didn't really feature last year. So, yeah, I mean, everything starts with Florida's front court, and then it becomes this question about Lee and Fland, but really, the Xaivian Lee stuff, has it fascinated you? Because like this narrative about the Ivy League is a little amusing to me when you consider that like Chaz Lanier, Janai Broom, Walter Clayton, like all those guys Mark Sears, they all came from leagues that aren't anywhere near as good as the Ivy League.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that the Ivy League is something where you have to have a high basketball IQ, and that's going to translate really, really well. I mean, that's kind of a weed out in a sense where if you're not able to do it there, you're not going to be able to play. You're not going to go out there and have this all-world skill set. And what Xaivian Lee was able to do there, and just the way he impacted every single facet of the game, was really, really impressive. And now you're going to even have probably less responsibilities for him in a sense. He's not going to have to be this consistent rebounder in a sense. He's going to be able to help run the fast break and get out in transition. He's going to have 4 capable shooters around him pretty much at all times, which is going to take off some of the collapsing around him and take off some of the defensive pressure that he may face. And if you have bigs like Tommy and Alex who can pop out and knock down 3-pointers, it's going to be a little bit tough to defend the pick and roll for Florida. And I think that's going to make Xaivian just absolutely thrive. I don't get people sleeping on Xaivian. I do think that Boogie may have a higher ceiling. I think that's quite possible. But when it comes to just being a consummate college basketball player, it's hard to find many who have a more complete skill set than Xaivian Lee. Now, the big question, like you mentioned, is he going to be able to be transcendent like Walter Clayton was? I mean, I think that still we can sit back there and reflect and say there were some people who were sleeping on Walter Clayton as late as February in last season.
Yeah,
you've been around Todd, who has joked even with the media about all the knock on Walt for being a true point guard in a sense. And then you see the Rick Pitino quote recently where he says there's no true point guards anymore. Well, Walt's a fantastic passer. And I understand that, anyone who has the ball in their hands and a usage rate like that is going to have some turnovers. It's just how the game is going to go. And he faced a considerable amount of double teams the minute he passed half court last year, and was still a guy who could go off for 25 points against you. You're probably going to see some people who are going to at times just miss the ability for Walt to maybe turn, nothing into something here. That is something that I think was very underappreciated. He could shoot you back into a game, and if the defense absolutely just, lock down other options for him, he would just go and make a play on his own. And he consistently made the right pass, and he was fearless. That is something that I do think may take a little bit of time for a guy like Xaivian Lee, where he is playing against an uptick in competition, and he needs to make sure that he is playing without, hesitation, is not afraid to make a mistake whatsoever. And you'd hope that the off season and the summer would eliminate a lot of that stuff, but we're going to have to actually see it unfold before I think that, this is going to be a guy who is going to be able to thrive in that role in command of the offense and be able to turn nothing into something sometimes.
One thing I got to do is correct my Condon stat line from the Sweet 16 because I accidentally read Tommy Hawks to everyone and now feel stupid. So Condon played 14 minutes. His 14-minute stat line was 6 points, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds. So he was having a very productive game and then got hurt. And you'll remember 1 assist came when he came back on the floor and made that ridiculous play where he made the pass from his knees. But otherwise, he also had a block. So he was good in that Sweet 16 game. And it seemed like he was back, actually. And then he gets hurt rather quickly there, and they didn't see him again anyway. It'll be nice to see Alex healthy. And look, to Graham's point, the question of, we talked about it with Ryan, who's the closer for Florida? Xaivian Lee has a huge bag, man. Like, there's not much he can't do in terms of creating his own look. I also think, and I know I've said that minutes are going to be hard. And so, like, if Alex Lloyd ends up playing 10 to 15 minutes, that's going to be because he earned it. He's a guy that is an absolute bucket, though, and was at times in their workouts this summer. Now, there were other days where, like CJ Ingram has a long way to go offensively, is what I've been told. Is very, very prepared defensively and is a guy that could play because of his defense, but isn't going to add much offensively, they don't think, his freshman year. Lloyd was ahead of where they thought he was defensively. But there are physicality questions. How many minutes can he handle? A guy that I've heard multiple staffers compare him to is Christian Anderson. So Florida fans familiar with Texas Tech and a guy that played really well against the Gators. Alex Lloyd he's thin, but he is 6'5". He can score, he can shoot, he gets to the free throw line. So yet another option. I think that the optionality of this team is one thing that is maybe not being talked about. Like, I think, for all of Florida's greatness last year, they were a little sloppy in transition because really Walt was the only super reliable transition ball handler. This team's going to have two of them, if not three, depending on Haugh's growth. Just stuff like that. So I do think that there's reasons to expect the offense to kind of continue to be really good, even if your sort of late game heroic shot making is not as good, which, how would it be with Walt gone?
That's probably one I think the most under talked about points of this Florida roster is that, and this is absolutely no disrespect to Elijah Martin, I cannot be more clear on that, but that wasn't someone who was really tasked too much with setting up and running Florida's offense. He wasn't a guy that too often you were going to see him bring the ball up the floor and set up the offense and command that. And now you have Lee and Fland, who both can do that at a really, really high level. That's going to make it difficult to defend Florida's backcourt. And so I do think that they're going to have more opportunities to create their own shots in the backcourt while still running it consistently through the front court. And, going back to Alex Condon a little bit, I do think that there was a little bit of a knock on him by some people for his decision-making as a passer last year. But you look at the numbers, what he was able to do and how often they ran the ball through him. He's one of the better passing big men in the country. I think that is a point of contention up there with him as his ability to improve as a three-point shooter, is that if he can even get a little bit better at his decision-making and his vision and knowing where guys are going to be on the court, this is going to, give you a chance to run things at a much higher rate. And, he didn't have a great passing performance against Houston, but that was the top defensive team in college basketball last year. That's an outlier more than an indication that this is someone who is prone to making poor decisions. And I think you'll see that improve as well. So with that said, that's three guys right there, along with Tommy as well, who's getting better at putting the ball on the floor, passing off the dribble as well, making decisions once he picks up the ball. That's three, maybe four guys right there who I think are going to just increase the impressive ball movement. So you may see Florida swing it around a little bit more rather than let Walt go make something happen with 10 seconds left on the shot clock. And that's what I think is going to be really interesting to see about Florida's offense, is just how much we see the even potential improvement in ball movement after a team that won a national championship and had so much chemistry, right, and guys that had played with each other and knew where they were going to be and got along and were unselfish, everything in that regard. The fascinating thing is that Florida could be even better at limiting turnovers, creating assists, and making the extra pass when it's there.
Great stuff with Graham Haugh. 247 Sports does a fantastic job over there. It's actually quite a relief to not have to talk about DJ Lagway and his soft tissue injuries for even a few minutes. I am, like everybody, excited for football. Glad that the season is mercifully only 15 days away. as we record on August 15th. But Graham, tell everybody where they can find your work. I think I already said it, but just where they can follow you. And thanks for joining us.
Hey, I really appreciate you giving me the chance to talk basketball. I mean, any break from football is fantastic. Obviously, I'm super excited for the football season. Don't get me wrong whatsoever, but there's only so much we can talk about it and so much we've been able to see so far. So games got to get played. I'm ready for it to get here, but I'm more excited for the best month of the year. As you know, that's November when we get basketball and football. I can't wait for it. Absolutely. But yeah, follow me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Graham Haugh. Follow me over at Swamp247. We'd love to have you talk basketball with us over there. But if you're listening to this, you already know how good of a job Neil and Eric do. And Eric is not too big time for us, obviously. So keep listening to the show. Neil does a fantastic job, gives you the best insight about Florida basketball and the game in general that you're not going to get anywhere else. So you guys are in the right place, and I'm just grateful to be able to join you for a little bit today.
All right, everybody. Graham Haugh joining us. I'm going to close us out. Go Gators. Keep attack closeouts.